The most financially damaging thing you can do right now has nothing to do with debt, overspending, or bad investments. It's the thing that feels the most responsible, the habit that feels like discipline, the decision you make that generates a quiet, steady sense of pride every time you check your balance. It's leaving your money exactly where it is, and it's costing you more than you've ever calculated. Here's the strange part. Your bank account balance doesn't lie to you. The number is real. The money is genuinely there. But what your balance never shows you, what no bank statement will ever print in bold at the top of the page, is the other number. The amount your money should be worth by now if it had been working instead of resting. The gap between where you are and where you'd be. That gap has a name. Economists call it opportunity cost. But honestly, a simpler name fits better. It's a slow leak. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where it is, how big it's gotten, and the precise 3-move system to stop it permanently. I've spent a long time studying the patterns that separate people who quietly build wealth from people who work just as hard and somehow stay flat. The gap almost never traces back to income. It traces back to where money lives between paychecks. There is a price you pay every single month for the feeling of financial security. Most people never see the invoice. You know the feeling. You open your banking app, the balance is healthy, and something in your chest relaxes. That feeling is real. It's legitimate. And to some degree, it's earned. You worked for that cushion, and you should feel good about it. But here's what that feeling is concealing. A standard checking account in 2026 pays somewhere around 0.07% in annual interest. That's not a rough estimate. That's the national average, documented by the FDIC. Meanwhile, the general rate at which prices rise, the cost of groceries, rent, fuel, healthcare, has been running well above that for years. What that means in plain terms: every single month your money sits in a standard checking account, it buys slightly less than it did the month before. Not because you touched it, not because anything went wrong, simply because everything around it got more expensive while it stood still. Think of it this way. Imagine you hired a contractor to build a wall around your savings. Every morning you wake up, the wall is a tiny bit shorter. Not dramatically, you wouldn't notice day to day, but after a year, after 5 years, after a decade, you look up and realize the wall is barely waist height. And nobody broke in, nobody stole anything, it just eroded. That's not a metaphor. That's the mathematical reality of keeping money somewhere it can't keep pace with the world it exists in. Here's the part that genuinely surprises people when they first see the numbers. Take $15,000 sitting in a checking account for 10 years. Nominally, it's still $15,000, but in terms of what it can actually purchase, the real goods and services it commands, it's worth closer to $11,500. You didn't spend $1. You lost nearly $4,000 simply by leaving the money somewhere convenient. That's not bad luck. That's a predictable, quantifiable outcome of a misunderstood decision made once and then never revisited. But here's where things get genuinely counterintuitive. The problem isn't just that your idle cash loses value, it's that it loses value while simultaneously making you feel like you're winning. Behavioral economists have studied this phenomenon extensively. When people see a large, stable number in their bank account, they report feeling financially secure, even when, by objective measures, their financial position is weakening. The number provides emotional reassurance that doesn't correspond to financial reality. This is what makes idle cash so uniquely dangerous compared to other financial mistakes. Overspending feels bad. Debt feels uncomfortable. Bad investments produce obvious losses. But idle cash in a checking account? It feels like responsibility. It feels like discipline. The emotional signal and the financial reality are pointing in completely opposite directions. Here's the most useful reframe I can give you. Your money is not neutral. There is no such thing as money that is simply staying put. Every dollar you own is either growing or shrinking, moving toward more purchasing power or less, based entirely on where it lives. $1 in an account earning less than inflation is $1 actively declining in value, as reliably as a block of ice on a warm afternoon. The ice doesn't choose to melt. The dollar doesn't choose to lose value. But both processes are continuous, quiet, and indifferent to how you feel about them. The only variable you control is where the ice lives. Stop. Before we go further, this is the part most financial conversations skip entirely, and it might be the most practically useful thing in this video. Your checking account balance is a psychological input, not just a financial one, and it's influencing your spending decisions in ways you're almost certainly not aware of. Research in behavioral finance consistently shows that people with large pooled checking balances spend more than people with the same total net worth whose money is separated into distinct accounts. The mechanism is straightforward. Your brain interprets visible money as available money. A large checking balance reads as, "I have room." A specific, right-sized spending account reads as, "Here is my budget." The same 20,000 produces different spending behavior depending entirely on presentation. This is not a discipline problem. This is an architecture problem, and architecture can be fixed. When your checking account holds 3 months of living expenses pools together with your emergency fund, your house down payment savings, and money you haven't assigned a purpose to yet, your brain sees one large reassuring number and files it under available. Individual purchases that would feel like overreach against a $2,000 balance feel entirely reasonable against a $20,000 balance, even if the $20,000 isn't actually yours to spend. The fix isn't willpower, it's structure. Separate accounts with specific purposes turn one misleading number into several honest ones. Your spending account shows only what's genuinely yours to spend this month. Your brain adjusts its baseline accordingly. Decisions that seemed fine before suddenly feel clearly out of range, not because your values changed, but because the information you're working with became accurate. Here's something I want to be direct about, because this is where most financial advice stays deliberately vague. Your emergency fund is almost certainly not as large as you think it needs to be, and the gap between what you believe you need and what you actually need is money sitting idle that should be working. The standard advice says 3 to 6 months of expenses. What it rarely clarifies is which expenses, not your current monthly spending total, your essential floor, the non-negotiable baseline, housing, utilities, food, minimum debt service, basic insurance, not subscriptions, not dining out, not the gym, not the streaming services. In a real emergency, a job loss, a health crisis, an unexpected relocation, those expenses disappear immediately. Your emergency fund only needs to carry the costs you can't cut. For most households, that number is meaningfully lower than their total monthly spend. Someone spending $5,000 a month might have genuine essentials of $2,800. Their actual emergency fund requirement at 6 months is $16,800, not $30,000. Run that calculation for yourself. Total only the expenses you could not eliminate in a crisis. Multiply by your target coverage period. What you find is almost always a smaller number than what's currently sitting in cash. Everything above that number is what financial planners call excess liquidity. It sounds professional and cautious. In practice, it means money that's losing ground every month while providing no meaningful additional security beyond what a properly sized emergency fund already provides. That excess belongs somewhere that will grow it, not because risk is good, but because the risk of keeping it idle is both real and invisible, which makes it the more dangerous choice. Here's the structure that resolves everything we've talked about. It's not complex. It takes an afternoon to implement, and once it's running, it requires almost no ongoing decisions from you. Bucket 1, spending, your checking account. This holds 1 month of actual expenses, housing, bills, daily spending, with a small buffer for timing variations. Nothing more. This is the account your brain uses as its spending reference point, and it should reflect your real monthly budget accurately. Bucket 2, reserve, a high-yield savings account, completely separate from your daily banking, ideally at a different institution. This holds your properly calculated emergency fund. In 2026, competitive high-yield accounts pay around 4 to 5% annually, which meaningfully outpaces inflation. Your emergency money earns real returns while remaining fully accessible within a few business days when genuinely needed. The separation creates the friction that protects it from casual spending. Bucket 3. Growth. Everything beyond buckets 1 and 2. This is money you won't need in the next 5 years, and it belongs in the market. Low-cost, broadly diversified index funds, not stock picks, not complex products, not anything requiring ongoing active management. The historical long-term performance of broad market index funds has significantly outpaced both inflation and savings accounts over any meaningful time horizon. Short-term volatility is real, which is why the 5-year threshold matters. But for money with a long enough runway, time is your primary asset. Here's the final piece that makes the whole system work: automation. The moment your paycheck arrives, automatic transfers execute before you ever check your balance. A fixed amount moves to savings. A fixed amount moves to investments. What remains in checking is your actual spending budget, not a number inflated by money that belongs elsewhere. When the system runs automatically, you stop relying on monthly discipline and start relying on monthly structure. That's not a subtle distinction. It's the entire difference between a plan that survives contact with real life and one that collapses the first time motivation dips. 3 ideas that don't typically appear in this conversation. Insight 1: the invisible wage gap. Most people think about their earnings in terms of gross income versus net income, what they make before and after taxes. But there's a third number nobody calculates: net of inflation income. If you earned a 3% raise last year and inflation ran at 3.5%, you didn't get a raise at all in purchasing power terms. You got a quiet pay cut. The same math applies to savings. A 0.07% return against 2.4% inflation isn't a gain. It's a minus 2.33% annual loss. Understanding your money's real return, not its nominal return, fundamentally changes how you evaluate safe decisions. Insight 2: the fear premium. Excess cash beyond a rational emergency fund isn't really safety. It's a premium you're paying for emotional comfort. Like an insurance policy with an enormous deductible, it provides reassurance while delivering poor technical value. The question worth asking isn't, does this make me feel secure, but what is this feeling actually costing me per year? Calculating the annual opportunity cost of idle cash in concrete dollars, $800 in lost returns, $1,400, $2,200, transforms the decision from emotional to analytical. Most people, once they see the annual cost of their comfort, find it far less comfortable. Insight 3: structure as a cognitive asset. When your financial system is properly architected, it doesn't just manage money better, it frees cognitive bandwidth you didn't know you were spending. Checking account anxiety, the low-grade background noise of, is this okay to spend? The mental accounting you perform every time you make a discretionary purchase. These are cognitive loads imposed by poorly structured finances. A well-designed 3-bucket system eliminates most of them. Your spending account tells you what you have to spend, you spend it. The question answers itself. Let's come back to where we started, that feeling of security, the one you get when the balance is high and everything looks fine. You now know something about that feeling that you didn't know at the start of this video. It has a cost, not a hidden fee, not a fine print charge. A quiet, mathematical, compounding cost that runs every day, regardless of what else is happening in your life. The most expensive thing you own right now might be your sense that everything is okay. Here's the honest summary. Money in the wrong place doesn't stay still. It declines, not dramatically, not in ways that trigger alarm, but consistently, predictably, in the same direction every single month. The bank profits from holding your deposits. Inflation eats what the bank doesn't touch. And the distance between where you are and where you'd be if your money had been working grows wider with every year you wait. The system that closes that distance is not complicated. A right-sized emergency reserve in a high-yield account, long-term surplus invested in diversified index funds, spending account that reflects your real budget, automation that handles the transfers before you ever see the full number. The fact that you watched this to the end tells me you're someone who actually wants to understand how this works, not just feel like they do. That instinct is worth acting on. The difference between knowing and doing is one afternoon of account setup. Make that afternoon happen this week. There's a video right here that walks through exactly how to build this system from scratch, which accounts to open, in what order, and how to automate transfers so the whole thing runs without you. That's your next watch. Subscribe if this kind of clarity is useful to you. One new framework every day.